Imagine you walk into an empty room. In the dead center of that room sits a prominent, glossy red button. Next to it is a simple, unambiguous sign that reads, "Under no circumstances are you to press this button." What happens inside your mind? Logically, you have no reason to press it. It serves no purpose, grants no reward, and explicitly violates a clear instruction. Yet, for the vast majority of us, a strange, almost magnetic pull begins to take over. The restriction itself transforms this mundane object into something irresistible. The moment you are told not to do something, doing it becomes the only thing you can think about. This isn't just a quirky habit. It is a fundamental paradox of human nature. We are the only species on Earth that spends thousands of years engineering complex societies built on laws, morals, and guiding principles, only to harbor a deep, primal desire to tear them down. From ancient mythologies warning us against forbidden fruit and forbidden boxes, to modern legal systems straining to contain cybercrimes and civil disobedience, our relationship with authority has always been deeply conflicted. Why do we so intensely desire exactly what we are told to avoid? Is it a flaw in our moral compass, or is it woven into the very fabric of our survival? The answer, it turns out, has been hiding inside you all along. To understand the immediate psychological trigger behind this behavior, we have to travel back to 1966, when psychologist Jack Brehm introduced a concept that permanently changed how we understand human motivation: psychological reactance theory. Brehm argued that human beings possess a deeply ingrained need for autonomy and self-determination. We need to feel like the authors of our own lives. So when a rule, a law, or even a well-meaning piece of advice tells us, "You cannot do this," our brains don't simply process it as information. They process it as a threat. The moment our freedom of choice is restricted, a state of emotional arousal is triggered within us. Brehm called this arousal, reactance, an uncomfortable psychological friction. And how do we relieve that friction? By doing the exact thing that was forbidden, by proving to ourselves and to the world that we are still in control. Think about everyday examples. A sign that says "Do not climb on the rocks" makes those rocks look like the most exciting terrain in the entire park. In psychology, this is closely linked to what is known as the iron rule of forbidden fruit. When an option is taken away, its perceived value immediately skyrockets. Brehm's theory explains the emotional spark. It tells us that our impulse to break rules is a defense mechanism, the mind's fierce, instinctive act of self-preservation. But it raises a deeper question. If we are natural-born rebels, how did a species full of defiant individuals ever manage to cooperate long enough to build civilizations? To answer that, we have to leave the realm of individual psychology behind and peer deep into our evolutionary past. Historian and author Dr. Yuval Noah Harari famously argued in *Sapiens* that humanity's greatest superpower wasn't physical strength, or even our ability to make tools. It was our capacity to create and believe in shared myths. Harari observed that chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, can only cooperate in groups capped at roughly 50 individuals. Why? Because their cooperation depends entirely on personal acquaintance. A chimp needs to know you, groom you, and fight alongside you before it can trust you. Humans, however, can cooperate by the millions. With complete strangers, we can fight wars together, build megacities, and run global economies across continents. We manage this because we believe in things that have no physical form: nations, laws, human rights, monetary systems. These are Harari's shared myths, imagined realities that exist solely within our collective consciousness. But here is the critical catch. A physical law, like gravity, enforces itself. No police force is required to stop people from floating into space. But an imagined law, a social rule created by a tribe, is inherently fragile. It requires constant, conscious reinforcement to survive. In early human tribes, rules were life and death boundaries. They dictated who ate first, who could mate, how resources were divided. To maintain order, tribes established harsh codes of conduct. Yet within those very tribes, a fascinating evolutionary game was being played in the shadows. If an individual blindly follows every cultural restriction without question, they operate entirely within limits set by the dominant figures around them. But if an individual carefully, strategically tests a rule, taking slightly more than their share, navigating around a social taboo, and manages to avoid detection. They gain a direct survival advantage. More resources, more status, higher reproductive success. This is closely tied to what evolutionary thinkers call the gossip theory. Early human language evolved significantly around the act of gossip, talking about who was trustworthy, who was cheating, who was bending the rules. Our ancestors were locked in a permanent arms race. On one side, the group enforcing the shared myth through social pressure and exile. On the other, individual humans quietly calculating how far they could push the boundary without falling off the edge. We are the descendants of those who survived that tightrope walk. The ones who were bold enough to test the boundary and skilled enough not to fall. But walking that tightrope required something extraordinary, a mind capable of holding an abstract rule, imagining a future where that rule is broken and deliberately choosing to act. And that brings us to a third, even deeper layer, one hidden inside the very words we use to speak to one another. Linguist Dr. Derek Bickerton spent his career studying how humanity crossed from primitive vocalizations, what he called proto-language, into the rich, structurally complex systems of grammar and syntax we use today. And buried inside that linguistic leap is a profound and unsettling side effect, the creation of a cognitive landscape where the forbidden could finally exist. Animal communication is almost entirely anchored to the present moment. A vervet monkey can sound a specific alarm that means eagle or leopard, but that monkey cannot warn its peers about an eagle it saw 3 weeks ago, or discuss a hypothetical predator that might arrive tomorrow. Their communication is locked to the immediate physical world. Bickerton argued that the defining feature of true human language is a property he called displacement, our ability to communicate about things, places, ideas, and futures that are not physically present. Because of displacement, we can construct entire worlds out of nothing but thought. We can discuss the past, plan for the distant future, and, crucially, we can construct abstract boundaries. Like laws, when language evolved true syntax, something remarkable became possible. We could suddenly tell a tribe member, if you cross that mountain range next season, you will be punished. Notice, what just happened? Through the power of syntax and displacement, language forces the human brain to mentally simulate a scenario that hasn't happened yet. It forces us to picture the forbidden act in order to understand the rule meant to prevent it. And this is where the trap snaps shut. The human brain is a simulation engine. To process a negative command, to understand what it means not to do something, the brain must first vividly construct the very thing it is being told to avoid. Don't think about a pink elephant. What happened? Your brain built one instantly. The restriction delivers the concept directly into your consciousness. Bickerton's work implies that when humanity gained the gift of complex grammar, we inadvertently cursed ourselves with a cognitive playground for deviance. Laws do not merely deter, they function as a map of unexplored possibilities. Every time authority draws a boundary and names it, language delivers that forbidden terrain straight to our imagination. We see the line. Our minds simulate what lies across it, and the reactance Jack Brehm described immediately flares to life. Our capacity for language did not just build our societies, it built the very mechanism of our rebellion. Our words create the laws that hold civilization together, and those same words constantly whisper an invitation to break them. Everything we've examined so far, the emotional impulse, the evolutionary strategy, the linguistic trap, all of it converges in a single place, the human brain. And inside that brain, there is a chemical system so ancient and so powerful that it may be the most honest explanation of all. That chemical is dopamine. You've almost certainly heard of it. It is the molecule associated with pleasure, reward, and the warm glow of satisfaction. But here is where popular understanding gets it dangerously wrong. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It is the anticipation chemical. Neuroscientist and Stanford professor Dr. Robert Sapolsky's decades of research into human and primate behavior revealed something that reframes everything we think we know about motivation. Dopamine does not surge when a reward is received. It surges in the moments before, in the charged electric space between desire and fulfillment. The brain is not wired to celebrate what it has. It is wired to hunger for what it does not yet possess. And it gets more unsettling. Sapolsky found that dopamine release is not proportional to the size of a reward. What amplifies it most dramatically is uncertainty. When an outcome is guaranteed, dopamine rises modestly. But when the outcome is unpredictable, when there is a genuine chance of either winning or losing, dopamine can surge to levels that dwarf the response to a certain reward. This is the neuroscientific engine behind gambling. A slot machine does not hook its victims because of the money they win. It hooks them because of the maddening electric uncertainty of not knowing whether this pull of the lever will be the one. The brain doesn't simply respond to the reward. It becomes intoxicated by the possibility. Now apply that to the act of breaking a rule. When you contemplate crossing a forbidden boundary, your brain doesn't run a calm cost-benefit calculation. It experiences the ultimate uncertain gamble. Will you get away with it or be caught? Will you gain something extraordinary or lose everything? The outcome is entirely unknown. And that uncertainty floods your neural pathways with dopamine before you have made a single decision. The forbidden is not merely conceptually tempting. It is chemically engineered, at the level of brain architecture, to feel irresistible. And if you've ever wondered why adolescents seem almost constitutionally incapable of resisting risk, neuroscience offers a precise answer. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for evaluating long-term consequences and suppressing impulsive behavior, does not fully mature until approximately the age of 25. Meanwhile, the dopaminergic reward system, ancient, primal, and relentless, runs at full power from the earliest years of life. Teenagers are not reckless because of ignorance. They are neurologically wired to prioritize the dopamine surge of uncertain, transgressive experience over the cold logic of future consequences. And from an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Adolescence is precisely the window in which a young human must separate from the safety of the tribe and carve out an independent identity. A brain too cautious, too compliant, too obedient during this critical period will never take the risks necessary to establish its own place in the world. The irony is almost unbearable. The very chemical system evolution built to drive human ambition, exploration, and survival is the same system that makes every prohibition feel like an invitation. We are not weak for feeling the pull of the forbidden. We are, quite literally, running the program we were built to run. We have now mapped the interior landscape of the individual human mind. Every institution, every system of law, every cultural value humanity now holds sacred, was built on the ruins of a defiance that once seemed unconscionable. The civilization that creates the rules was itself born from rule-breaking. In 1633, Galileo Galilei stood before the Roman Inquisition and was forced to recant his observations confirming that the earth revolves around the sun. The Church, the supreme authority of his age, had declared the opposite to be divine truth. Galileo's data was heresy. His evidence was a crime. He spent the final years of his life under house arrest, a convicted transgressor who had dared to trust his own eyes over the word of an institution. Yet today we remember him not as a criminal, but as the father of modern science. His defiance did not destroy civilization. It rebuilt it on a foundation of observable truth. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed 95 grievances to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg, publicly challenging the supreme authority of the papacy. By every legal and theological standard of his era, he was a dangerous radical. He was excommunicated, declared an outlaw, driven from institutional protection. Yet the rebellion he ignited, the Protestant Reformation, permanently reshaped the religious, political, and intellectual landscape of the Western world. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus to a white passenger. By the letter of the law, she was wrong. By every standard of established authority, she was a criminal. Yet that single, quiet act of defiance ignited the Montgomery bus boycott, accelerated the civil rights movement, and helped dismantle a legal architecture of oppression that had stood for generations. Her transgression became a cornerstone of justice. These are not isolated stories. They are the pattern, the deep, repeating rhythm of human history. And notice what each of them has in common. In every case, the authority that condemned the rebel was itself the product of a prior rebellion. The church that silenced Galileo had once defied the Roman Empire. The government that arrested Rosa Parks had been founded by colonists who defied a king. Every institution, at its origin, was someone else's transgression. Power does not precede defiance. They are born together. French philosopher Michel Foucault spent much of his intellectual life examining exactly this paradox. His conclusion was radical. Wherever a system of power exists, resistance is not merely a response to it. It is embedded within it from the very beginning. Every law implies its violation. Every authority conjures its rebel. To draw a boundary is to create the desire to cross it. American philosopher Henry David Thoreau articulated this with remarkable moral clarity in his 1849 essay, Civil Disobedience. Thoreau argued that when a law is unjust, it is not merely a citizen's right to break it. It is a citizen's moral obligation. A society's moral evolution depends on individuals willing to absorb the punishment of unjust laws in order to expose their injustice to the world. The rebel, in Thoreau's view, is not the enemy of society. The rebel is its conscience. Gandhi read Thoreau. Martin Luther King read Gandhi. And the arc of liberation connecting those three figures, across continents, centuries, and causes, is a masterclass in how principled defiance shapes the boundaries of the possible. Political scientists trace this through a concept called the Overton window. The range of ideas a society considers acceptable at any given moment. The window does not move on its own. It is moved by rebels, by thinkers, artists, activists, and ordinary people who stand at the outermost edge of acceptability and take one deliberate step beyond. What was unthinkable becomes radical. What was radical becomes debatable. What was debatable becomes policy. What was policy becomes obvious. The rebel and the architect are not different people standing on opposite sides of the wall. They are the same person, standing at the boundary, looking across, and deciding that what lies beyond is worth the cost of crossing. So why do we do it? Why do we harbor this relentless, burning desire to cross the line? Press the button, taste the fruit we were told to leave untouched. We now have 5 answers, each one deeper and more ancient than the last. We break rules because Brehm showed us that our psychology treats every restriction as a direct assault on our most fundamental need. The freedom to author our own lives. Defiance, in this light, is not weakness. It is the mind's fiercest act of self-preservation. We break rules because Harari's evolutionary lens revealed that we are the descendants of those who survived the tightrope, bold enough to test the boundary, and skilled enough not to fall from it. We break rules because Bickerton's work on language showed us that the moment a prohibition is spoken, the human brain is compelled to construct the forbidden act in full, vivid, irresistible detail. Our words build the walls of civilization, and then quietly press a map of every door into our waiting hands. We break rules because Sapolsky's Neuroscience laid bare the chemical truth beneath all our rationalizations. The forbidden is dopamine-soaked, uncertainty-charged, and neurologically engineered to feel like the most alive thing we can possibly pursue. And we break rules because 5,000 years of human history have proven, with undeniable weight, that the greatest leaps forward, scientific, moral, political, and artistic, were taken by individuals who looked at what was forbidden and decided that the cost of compliance was greater than the price of transgression. We need the rules. We need the boundaries. Without shared laws and the myths that sustain them, we are nothing more than clever, quarrelsome animals, brilliant in moments, but incapable of building anything that lasts. The line is necessary, but without our innate, irrepressible impulse to question, test, and occasionally shatter those laws, the scaffolding becomes a cage. The protection becomes a prison. The line meant to keep us safe would simply keep us small. Defiance is the engine of human progress. It is the force that compels the scientist to question consensus when the institution demands silence. It is the voice that moves the artist to shatter the convention her predecessors called eternal. It is the quiet, unshakable courage of the citizen who stands before an unjust law and says, "Not today. Not me. Not anymore." That is not a flaw in the human design. That is the design. We are a species in permanent, productive tension with ourselves, building the rules we need to survive together, and cultivating the restlessness we need to outgrow them. We draw the line, and then we spend our entire lives wondering, with every ounce of our brilliant, dangerous, magnificent capacity, what waits on the other side? The next time you feel that irresistible pull toward the forbidden, recognize it for what it truly is. Millions of years of evolutionary survival, encoded in your neurons. Spoken into existence by your language, ignited by your chemistry, and validated by the full unbroken sweep of human history, all converging in a single electric moment of temptation. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep questioning the boundaries.